Today, we have a special guest. Bill Holter is one of the most respected names in the precious metals sector. We're going to talk about the current situation in the world, the monetary, fiscal, geopolitical situation. But importantly, we're going to narrow it down then into what it means for silver and gold, what it means for you as someone who likely stacks silver and gold as a way to protect yourself. Hey, Bill, welcome to Ron's Basement.
Thanks for having me, Ron.
Yeah. So Bill, I had Lynette Zhang on my show, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago. And when I was talking to her, I said, everything feels crazy. And she said, well, things tend to feel crazy right before they break. When you look out at what's going on in the world, geopolitically, economically, monetarily, do you feel like we're closer now to the system breaking than other times that you've observed in the past?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, no matter where you look, whether it be financially, politically, socially, the things that are going on today, even 5 years ago, would have been insanity before 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Go back, 15 years ago, it's bigger insanity. Go back 25 years ago to 1999, 2000, and where we are now, uh, it would be science. Today would be science fiction 25 years ago.
You bring up a great point. I hadn't really, I guess I've thought about that, but it's true, right? If 10 years ago, and I've said this to my audience before, that like if you'd been down here in the basement, or Bill, if you'd been here in the basement 10 years ago and told me that there'd be a war in Europe with the Ukraine, if you told me what the national debt levels would be at, if you told us about the little health crisis that we had back in March of 20, it would have been science fiction, right?
Yeah, and on top of that, don't forget the censorship that's going on, trying to shut down any voice of reason or any voice of truth with all the bullshit that is passed off as normal. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this is truly, you heard the story about the frog boiling in the pot. This is truly the frog boiling in the pot because there's still a lot of people out there who believe what's going on now is normal.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can still ask a lot of people, and I do this quite often uh, when I'm talking to someone who really doesn't get it. I ask, do you think the US government or US Treasury is bankrupt? And 95% of the people are going to say, or even more, 95% of the people are going to say, well, yeah, they're bankrupt, but it doesn't matter. And you're right, it doesn't matter until it matters. But when it matters, life as we know it is going to be, uh, completely different from where we are now, which is, like I said, many consider where we are now normal.
Yeah, it feels like, I live in suburbia of St. Louis, right? Kind of a upper middle class area. And most of my neighbors, almost all of my neighbors, are just kind of oblivious. It's almost like they just believe whatever they hear on the news. And it does feel like you said, like frogs being boiled in water, and have no concern whatsoever for the national debt. Or I mean, do you think there's going to be this like big event that will force people to wake up?
Oh, absolutely. And it could be any of a dozen or more things that blow up. But yeah, people are going to all of a sudden, boom, understand when whatever the event is that happens within 72 hours, life as we know it will no longer exist.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's gonna hit somebody over the head. It'll hit people over the head like a 2x4.
Yeah. Well, I was born in 1970, and throughout my entire life, those paper US dollars, I was, I was taught, and from an early age, to believe that they were valuable. Um, do you think the fact that that the whole system is just credit based on paper, that it's like a house of cards, and that when it does start to when something changes, maybe it's a geopolitical event, and you kind of alluded to that, it could be any number of things, maybe it's a financial crisis type event, but that like people just don't realize that this whole system is totally based on credit and trust and confidence, and that once that changes, that everything could, hypothetically change very, very quickly.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I was one of the first. I mean, I've been writing since 2007. I left the country late 2006, knowing that 07, 08 was coming. And I was one of the very first to talk about everything runs on credit. Everything you do every day, all day long, there is a credit facility attached to it. Whether you're opening your water faucet, turning the lights on, getting in your car and driving, doesn't matter what you do, there's credit involved. And I've used this analogy probably 100 times. There's probably a dozen uses of credit for that one single loaf of bread in the store. They don't have little elves in the back room that bake bread. I mean, you've got farmers, they've got to borrow for fuel, borrow for seed, borrow uh, for fertilizer. Then it's got to be trucked to a silo. The silo uses credit. The truckers use credit. Then it gets trucked to a production facility that uses credit. Then it gets trucked again to the grocery store. And lo and behold, there's a lot of people that use their credit card and at this point are running balances up just to eat. So yes, everything runs on credit, and once credit ceases, it will not only mess up and destroy the financial world, but it's going to destroy the real economy because nothing will function without credit. And remember, credit, and I mean, you could go back to the I guess the Greek meaning of credit. It's basically confidence. Without confidence, credit will not be forthcoming. So when confidence breaks, everything breaks, and that's what what we are and what we have been uh, running on for years and years is pure confidence.
If you're looking to buy gold, silver, or platinum, do yourself a favor and check out Pimbex, the online precious metals bullion dealer and sponsor of Ron's Basement. I was a happy customer before they offered to support the channel. You'll find they have the best prices, quality, and service. I think Pimbex is best, and you will too. And be sure to tell them that you're from Ron's Basement. So I want to ask you a question, Bill, because as you're saying that, I'm thinking as I zoom out and look at the entire world now, and instead of maybe individuals transacting for loaves of bread, I'm looking at countries interacting with each other. It feels like that's actually happening on the worldwide stage right now. That countries are kind of beginning to reject, to a certain degree, the credit of the United States. Right? We have China selling treasuries. We have that on a worldwide basis we're seeing countries move away from that level of trust with each other. Does that make sense?
It's not so much trust with each other, it's trust in the United States because the dollar is what has settled more trade than any other currency on the planet because it's the world's reserve currency. And I mean, if you look at, if you want to, you're calling it the lack of trust. Half the world, or more than half the world at this point, no longer trusts the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
If there was complete trust in the United States, there would be no BRICS union. The BRICS would not be in the process of creating their own currency, which is said to going to be 40% gold backed. and I think the BRICS nations are backing, or whatever the final number is, and like I said, the number thrown around now is 40%. That is to keep and continue trust of the new currency. And I mean, the dollar has not been backed by gold since 1971, and it really wasn't backed by gold uh, since 1933, because that's when it was interchangeable with
Mhm.
dollars.
So I heard it said once, I'm going to get your take on this statement. So I found it very interesting that the BRICS countries uh, don't trust the US dollar. Obviously, we have the de-dollarization trend that's going on right now.
It's not the
But
dollar, it's the United States itself.
gotcha.
It's not the, it's the United States itself. I mean, look what we're doing, or what we're talking about doing with Russia's 300 billion. The rule of law in the United States is gone. And I mean, nations nations could see, China could see, Russia could see, the world could see, going all the way back to 2001 with the World Trade Center fiasco, which, I mean, there's engineers in China, there's engineers in Russia, there's engineers all over the world that know that two planes did not take those buildings down. So that put their antenna up that the U.S. was foisting a farce on the world. And what did we do with that farce? We went into Iraq, um, and that had been planned, before the year 2000 to go into the Middle East. And what's in the Middle East? Oil. I mean,
Yeah.
the world understands that the pristine rule of law that we had here in the United States that attracted capital for so many years is now gone.
Yeah. Do you think the current situation in Europe with Ukraine, that there's more to the story than is possibly being reported to us on the mainstream news?
Oh yeah, of course. Mainstream has never reported on Putin's. I think he's done now 7 or 8 speeches, full-length speeches. If you read, and I've urged people to read all of his speeches, but if you only read one, just read the first speech after they began the operation, or right before they began the operation. The man is not a crazy man. He sounds logical to me, and it sounds like he just wants free and fair trade, and he does not want his borders, uh, crashed on by NATO countries. Uh, Ukraine is a far. I mean, go back to 2014. There was a coup and installed basically a U.S. friendly president. Ukraine. I mean, if you look at the money that's been sent there, Ukraine is a money laundering operation.
Yeah.
And it was just I think 3 or 4 days ago, Lindsey Graham said the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
I mean, he came right out and said, and I forget what it was about. I think it was lithium, 10 trillion or 12 trillion
Yeah.
in lithium deposits. I mean, they have vast natural resources, and that's that's what the powers that be are looking at, are natural resources and cheap natural resources. So, I mean, yeah, Ukraine, the mainstream media lies to us about everything. Why would they tell us the truth about Ukraine?
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting developments, and I agree with you. I think you have to really, if you want to know the truth, really dig in and look at both sides of the story. And when you do that, there's a completely different perspective. At least that was my experience that I gained when looking not only at what's going on in Europe with the Ukraine, but all these previous military expeditions that it seems like our country has gone on for the last 20 years, one after another. And it leads a person to feel like really what's going on in the world is a little crazy right now. If we take the conversation back to silver and gold, you're a person. I mean, you sell silver and gold. You're a broker, I believe, for Miles Franklin. Um, do you
Right.
think do you think that silver and gold are a good avenue for individuals, for the person who's joining us right now, listening to our conversation, to protect themselves, to protect their families against what could be coming down the road?
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, gold and silver, the first reason you want to own them is because they are money, the only monies that cannot bankrupt. Every other uh, currency on the planet is issued by a central bank and backed by the full faith and credit of that central bank. And I mean, if you look at central banks today, pretty much all of them have negative equity. Bank of Japan, the European Central Bank, the U.S., the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve had 65 billion in equity starting 2023, and I think their bond portfolio was down, or they had losses of 155 billion by the end of the year. So technically, they were insolvent. The reason you want to own gold and silver is because they can't bankrupt, and B, if you hold the metals, it's out of the system. And I don't know, how much you or your audience has looked at the writing, The Great Taking, but that's absolutely not speculation. Those laws are on the books. They're not going to put laws on the books if they don't intend to use them. And using them basically will mean bailing in all customers' monies, whether it's a bank, whether it's a broker, whether it's an insurance company. When you give them money, you're a creditor. You're a lender to them. You're not a depositor. It's not yours.
Yeah, it's a interesting world in which we live in now, where it seems like everything is based on, like we talked about earlier, credit, or not real ownership or assets, and that silver and gold are what appear to be like one of the last real avenues that I can see, to actually hold something. Right, as I look over, I have a piece of silver that, like, that's here, that's mine. As long as I'm able to maintain my security of it, I own it. I'm not relying on anybody else. Or a promise from anybody else to provide the value that is kind of stored in that ounce of silver. Is that an accurate way to look at it?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, when you say that a store of value, I mean, it takes real capital, labor, and equipment to create an ounce of gold or to create an ounce of silver. All an ounce of gold is, or all an ounce of silver is proof of that labor, capital, and equipment has already been used. It can't be diluted. They can't print gold and silver, although they do it on the COMEX. They print contracts, and they've used those contracts to suppress and push the pricing down. But once this thing breaks and credit breaks, the pressure on gold and silver is going to be to the upside, because the leverage in the gold and silver market, unlike every other, and I shouldn't say every other market, but every other non-commodity market, all of that leverage is to the long side. It's on the buy side. Whereas all the leverage in gold and silver is on the short side. And when this thing breaks, if if markets hold together, which I I really cannot see that happening. I think all markets are going to close. But were the gold and silver markets to remain open, there would be massive buying, because I mean, you're looking at 300 ounces of silver sold short on paper for every 1 ounce of silver that exists in reality.
Wow. Is that the real? I hear different numbers, but as far as you're able to figure that, I mean, it's just astounding to think, like, that there's, for each 1 ounce of silver, literally 200 or 300 ounces are sold short.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you just all you've got to do is look at the COMEX open interest, divide it by inventory.
Yeah.
You can look at LBMA in London, same thing. And then you've got derivatives on top of the derivatives. So, 200, 300 may be, it may really be 2 or 3,000, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But the leverage is to the short side, not the long side.
Wow. Wow. So, and that was another question I had for you is, when I think back to, let's say, when the COVID-19 crisis first hit, or even just a little over a year ago when we had the banking crisis, of March and April of 2023. And I remember, and you're a person who's in the industry, but it became very difficult to find silver. It seemed like it
Right.
was gone quickly. Is that a precursor for what we could experience, but could it even be worse? I mean, it seems like with technology now and information spreading so much more quickly, and people being able to buy silver and gold online, that it feels like, and not trying to scare anybody into running out and buying any silver or gold as they're watching this, but it seems like that if we do hit like this event, where things do materially change, that it's going to be like all the silver and gold are going to be gone like quickly.
Yeah, it'll be once something breaks, the inventory. I mean, that was definitely a precursor. I mean, silver became extremely difficult to find, and at one point, I think we were taking orders on inbound silver that wouldn't arrive for 4 to 6 weeks. So it
Mm-hmm.
was super tight. And I mean, silver's already in a deficit, yet the solar industry is growing exponentially. And I mean, just look at how much silver is in each panel. So I mean, uh, you've got demand potential, not just from industry, medicinal, technology, etc. You will have huge demand from the retail side, which is what happened in 2020, 2021. Um, and on top of that, you do have governments that are buying silver. India, I think for the month of May, um, bought more silver in that 1 month than they had ever bought in any 3 month period of time ever before.
Wow.
So I mean, this is a supply and demand uh, equation, and
Yeah.
supply is not meeting demand. And what will ultimately snap is that there's going to be a failure to deliver. And man, being uh, the thinking animal that he is, when you tell man that he can't have something, he wants it even more.
Right. Right. And is it your experience that with silver in particular, um, people generally don't like to buy it when it's quote unquote on sale, right? When the price is going down, but that silver buyers tend to, jump on as the price goes up.
Yeah, that's always the case. I mean, uh, humans are momentum buyers.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I think about silver and
And
gold, go ahead.
one other thing on that, uh, humans are momentum buyers, but fear is a greater emotion than greed.
Ah,
So, I mean, you can have momentum buyers, buying from the greed aspect, but once there's a reason to pile into gold and silver because things have broken, then you'll see a stampede that's never been seen before.
that's when the missing link, which is just the last, I guess, year or two, the Western retail investor. I know the ETFs have had outflows, but that when that missing link shows up, but I think it's important, to realize as silver and gold investors that both the silver and the gold price have done very well over the last, I guess, 3 months, 6 months. I mean, we have a pretty good silver price. I think most people, in a really good gold price right now, and that they've done that, in the face of higher interest rates, which were, in a higher quote unquote dollar, if you want to call the DXY a measure of the dollar's value, that the gold and silver have performed very well in the face of headwinds that traditionally, again, if we'd gone back 5 years ago and I said, Bill, the Fed's going to raise rates at the fastest pace ever, the DXY index is going to be at 105. I've heard a lot of people say that they would have thought gold and silver should actually be much lower than where they are now. So the good news is that gold and silver performed very well against some major headwinds, and one of which is also that the demand from Western investors has been subdued as well. That, like, if we get Western demand picking up and we get lower interest rates and we get the dollar going down, who knows where we could go.
Yeah, the two metrics you mentioned, the USDX and also the ETFs, those are complete, in my opinion, they're completely unimportant. I mean,
Okay.
the USDX, you're measuring the dollar versus other currencies. You're measuring one piece of shit versus a bigger pile of shit. So the USDX index, that's pure paper. What's
Yeah.
more important is what will your or how much of your currency do you need to buy a cup of coffee or a gallon of gas? Gold. That's the real measurement. And as far as the ETFs are concerned, if you look at their prospectuses, they don't have to hold physical gold. I mean, they can hold contracts, they can hold futures, they can hold forwards, they can hold derivatives on derivatives. So whether or not there's, quote, an outflow or an inflow, I don't think it matters, because I don't think they deal in physical metal in a big way. And I was on the record back in, what was it, 2003, 2004, saying that the GLD and SLV, which were the first two ETFs to come out, I thought, and I believe I was absolutely correct, that those were pressure valves, if you will, to divert, if you want to call it lazy capital, because all you had to do was, open a brokerage account, point and click, and you bought the shares. As opposed to going through, it's not difficult, but there's more involved to buying physical metal, having it shipped to yourself or stored or whatever. And I view that the ETFs all along, and still are, pressure valves to divert demand away from the real deal and into, paper gobbledygook.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because I've had that same thought about cryptocurrencies as well. Here in St. Louis, the local plumbing code requires that if you put in a hot water heater, you have to have, there's a name for it. It's about the size of a basketball, like another little tank that's connected to your hot water heater, in case the pressure builds up too much in the hot water heater, that the pressure gets dissipated into this tank. I forget what they're called, pressure relief. And I'd never heard that. That's interesting you bring that up about the ETFs, right? Because, right, of course, if they don't have to actually hold the physical metal, that it's, if you work off the premise, which I believe, right, that the dollar and our gold and silver are kind of the enemy of the dollar, that the powers that be don't want all that money going into physical gold and silver, that those relief valves are there to kind of siphon money away from. But at some point, doesn't the physical market eventually win, Bill?
Well, yeah, and I think that is happening. You're already seeing the Shanghai exchange, which is mostly a cash and carry exchange. It's a physical exchange.
Yeah.
I mean, they're trading at a premium over paper, so that there's a premium over the COMEX and a premium over LBMA. And what's happening is, with that higher price, it's a guaranteed profit via arbitrage. So you're seeing buying in the West, shipping it to China and being sold there and locking in a guaranteed profit.
Wow. It's just crazy what what we could see transpire within the next 10 years. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting ride. Bill, on behalf of myself and the viewer who joined us, I want to say thank you. If people want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, what's the best avenue for that?
Yeah, you can go to my website. It's just billholter.com. There is a contact button if you want to contact me. If you want to contact me directly, my business email is bholter@proton.me.
Okay. And I'll put that in the video description, the links as well for our viewer if they want to reach out and get in contact with you. Is there anything I forgot to ask you about, Bill, or anything you want to mention before we sign off?
Well, we could do this obviously for hours and hours.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would say to the average person, you need to take care of yourself because no one else is going to do it for you. And if you're a believer that the government's here to help you, well, good luck.
Yeah. Buy silver and gold. That's a good first step as well. I'll throw that one in there.
It's only one step, though. There's all kinds of steps.
Yeah. Yeah. All kinds of things that we can do. Food, community, right? And things along that line.
Right. The other precious metal being lead. I mean, you got to be able to protect your position.
Yeah.
You know, at some point, if you want, we could do a prepping type checklist.
Okay, that would be awesome. I know that for the viewer that joined us today, they got a lot out of listening to you talk about that, but that would be great. Maybe in 3 or 4 weeks, I'll reach out again and we can get together. That would be, and I think I would benefit from that because I think like a lot of the viewers, I'm living more in the suburbia setting. So to hear some ideas on other things outside of precious metals that a person needs to do could be provide a lot of value to our viewers.
Yeah, on my website, there is an icon box up top called Grizzly's Corner. It's written by a guy who used to go into the dark lands of Idaho for 6 months at a time with a mule team and come out, no worse for wear. So he's written a bunch of stuff. That's a very good resource. I think early on he put up a checklist of things you need to do. So you could probably spend an hour, 2 hours on that alone. And if you followed his links, you could probably spend, a month or more digging into it. So Grizzly's Corner is a very good resource for people who are looking to prepare.
Be prepared. Sounds good, Bill. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you again. And thanks to our viewer for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Fortuna Silver Mines is a global intermediate gold and silver producer. Since 2005, Fortuna's best-in-class management has delivered impressive growth and profits. Fortuna's solid financial position and operational expertise allows for performance in any precious metals price cycle and provides a foundation from which to harvest great profits in more favorable metals markets. Investing in Fortuna is an investment in quality, long-term, sustainable production of in-demand precious and base metals. First Mining Gold is a development company advancing 2 of the largest gold projects in Canada. Springpole in Ontario and Duparquet, located in Quebec, each already has 5 million ounces of gold reserves, but exploration initiatives are underway at both projects to find even more gold. First Mining is well-financed, has 0 debt, and owns an interest in 4 additional Canadian gold development projects.